The sound of Emily's heels clicked against the cold marble floor as she walked down the long hallway of her father's mansion. Each step felt heavier, as though the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. At the end of the hall, the large oak door of her father's office loomed, a barrier between her and whatever nightmare awaited inside. She had never seen him so angry before, his face pale with rage, his jaw tight as if the very act of speaking was a painful endeavor. As she entered, Richard Lancaster, the millionaire businessman who built an empire from nothing, stood behind his massive mahogany desk. His posture was rigid, his expression unreadable. The sharpness in his eyes made her heart skip a beat. "Sit down, Emily," he ordered, his voice cold, distant, unlike the father she'd known all her life. Emily hesitated for a moment before taking the seat across from him. Her palms were clammy, her breath shallow. She had no idea what was going on, but whatever it was, she knew it wasn't good. Richard had always been a man who controlled everything, his wealth, his business, even his family. But today, something was different. Something was off. "I'm not going to beat around the bush," he continued, his tone still as sharp as ever. "I've made a decision. A very important one. And you're going to follow through with it." The words hung in the air, suffocating her with their weight. Emily felt the color drain from her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "What decision?" she managed to whisper after a long pause. Richard leaned forward, his fingers steepled, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're going to marry Jack Sullivan." The words struck her like a slap in the face. Emily blinked, her mind racing to process what he had just said. Jack Sullivan? The farmer? The man she had met only once, a man from a completely different world. Her mind spun, and for a moment, the room seemed to spin with her. "Father, I don't understand." "Why would you?" "Because I said so," Richard interrupted, his voice growing more forceful. "You've always done what I told you, Emily. But now, it's time to grow up and accept reality. Your marriage to Jack Sullivan isn't just about you. It's a business arrangement. It's for the good of this family. And it's final." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She had to have misunderstood. This couldn't be happening. She was being forced to marry a man she barely knew, someone she had no connection to, someone from a world so far removed from hers it might as well have been another planet. But, why him? Emily managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Why Jack? Why not someone else? Her father's eyes darkened. Jack is the right man. He's what we need. You will marry him tomorrow. Everything will be arranged. There's no room for negotiation. Her mind was in chaos. She could feel the bile rising in her throat, the panic creeping up behind her like a shadow. She had to say something, had to argue, had to find a way out of this. But her father was unwavering, his expression unyielding. He had made his decision, and in his eyes, there was no room for discussion. But I don't even know him. I don't love him, father. This isn't fair, Emily protested, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Richard's eyes flashed with irritation, but he remained calm. You don't need to love him, Emily. This is not about love. This is about duty. This is about preserving what's been built. You will do your part. You will marry him, and you will make this work. The finality in his voice struck her to her core. This wasn't just a decision, it was a command. And one she couldn't refuse. Tomorrow, Richard repeated. The wedding will be held at Sullivan's farm. I expect you to show up on time and do your duty as my daughter. A heavy silence followed, and Emily sat there, frozen. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in on her, suffocating her. She opened her mouth to speak again, but no words came out. What could she say? What could she possibly do to change his mind? Nothing. She was powerless. Richard rose from his chair, walking toward the window. "I've worked too hard to let you mess this up, Emily. Don't make me regret this decision. Do as you're told." And with that, he dismissed her. As she left the room, Emily's mind was reeling. Her father had just made a decision that would change her life forever, and she was powerless to stop it. She had never felt so trapped, so utterly cornered. The thought of marrying Jack Sullivan, of walking down the aisle to a man she didn't even know, made her feel sick to her stomach. But the worst part wasn't the man. The worst part was the realization that her father, the man she had always looked up to, was willing to sacrifice her happiness for something she couldn't quite understand yet. As she walked down the hall, her legs felt like they might give out beneath her. The mansion seemed to close in on her, every ornate painting on the walls, every polished surface a reminder of the life she had been forced into. She barely noticed when the chauffeur opened the door of the waiting car. The ride to the farm felt like an eternity. She stared out the window, watching the city's skyline fade into the countryside, but her mind was 1,000 miles away. What had her father been hiding? What was this all about? When she finally arrived at the Sullivan farm, it was late afternoon, and the sun hung low in the sky. The simple farmhouse was a stark contrast to her father's opulent mansion. The air smelled of freshly tilled earth and hay, a far cry from the sterile, perfumed atmosphere she had grown up with. Jack Sullivan stood at the front door, his broad shoulders framed by the rustic doorway. He looked nothing like the men she was accustomed to. His clothes were simple, worn in, yet his presence was commanding in its own way. He didn't smile when she approached, but there was something in his eyes, something that made her heart race, though she couldn't place why. Emily felt awkward, out of place in her designer dress and heels. She had no idea what to say to this man, who was now going to be her husband, someone she had never even spoken to before. "Emily," Jack said, his voice deep and steady. "I guess we should get this over with." His words were blunt, but they struck a chord in her. She wasn't the only one who didn't want this. But why was he agreeing to it? Why would a man like Jack, seemingly strong, independent, and proud, submit to such a marriage? Emily's thoughts were interrupted as her father's voice echoed behind her. "Get inside, Emily. There's no time to waste." Jack stepped aside, and Emily walked past him into the house, her heart heavy with fear and uncertainty. The wedding would happen tomorrow, and there was no escaping it. But deep down, she knew that something wasn't right. Something bigger was at play. Emily couldn't sleep that night. The small, uncomfortable bed in the guest room of the Sullivan farmhouse felt like a prison. The silence of the countryside was overwhelming, almost suffocating, as the occasional rustling of leaves outside the window was the only sound to break the stillness. Her mind raced, her thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and fear. She tried to remember what had led her here, to this moment, but the more she thought about it, the less it made sense. Everything her father had said, every decision he'd made, felt like it was part of something much bigger, a mystery that she was only beginning to uncover. She kept thinking about the letter she'd seen earlier, tucked away on the mantelpiece of her father's study. The name on the envelope was Sullivan, the same name as the man she was about to marry. But why would her father be receiving letters from someone in this family, especially when the Sullivan family had always been considered beneath them? Why did he feel the need to hide it? She hadn't dared to open it, she hadn't even touched it, but the sight of it had shaken her to her core. And then there was Jack. Emily's thoughts drifted to him, to his calm but distant demeanor. There had been no excitement in his eyes when he first saw her, no joy. His expression had been neutral, like a man resigned to his fate. She wondered if he felt the same way she did. Did he want this marriage as little as she did, or was there something more to him? What was his story? She turned over in bed, pulling the thin, worn blanket closer around her. The farmhouse was old, creaking with every gust of wind, but even in the stillness, she could feel the weight of the world pressing on her chest. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow, her life would change forever. And yet, she had no idea why it was happening or what her father's motives were. The next morning, the sun was just beginning to rise as Emily prepared herself for the wedding. She dressed in silence, her mind still a whirlwind of unanswered questions. The dress she was given was simple, nothing like the extravagant gowns she had worn for other formal occasions. It was plain, almost modest, but it didn't matter. She was only going through the motions. There was no joy, no excitement, only a sense of impending doom. She couldn't help but glance toward the window as she dressed, watching the first light of day creep over the horizon. It felt like a sign, like a new chapter was about to begin, a chapter she never asked to write. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Jack. "Emily," he said from the other side. "It's time." She took a deep breath and walked toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. When she opened it, Jack stood there in his simple, dark suit. He didn't look any different than he had the day before, still the same distant, unreadable man. His eyes flickered to hers for a moment before he looked away, his expression distant, as if he were trying to shut out any emotions that might surface. "Are you ready?" he asked, though there was no warmth in his voice. It was more of a statement than a question. Emily nodded, unable to speak. The words were stuck in her throat. She wasn't ready. She didn't want this, but there was no turning back. She had no choice. She followed Jack out of the room, down the narrow hallway of the farmhouse, and into the small living room where the ceremony was set to take place. It was so different from the grand weddings she had attended in the past, the ones where her father's wealth and power were on full display. This was small, intimate, and yet it felt like a farce. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. As they reached the room, Emily's eyes scanned the guests, mostly farmers, workers from the surrounding land, and a few people she didn't recognize. There were no high-profile guests, no influential figures from her father's world. This was not the life she was used to. It felt like a dream she had no part in, a nightmare she couldn't escape. Her father stood at the front of the room, his eyes sharp as ever, his expression unreadable. He gave Emily a single nod as she entered, but there was no smile, no warmth in his gaze. He didn't look proud. He looked like a man who had just made a deal, and he was about to close it. Emily couldn't help but wonder what kind of deal her father had made with the Sullivan family. Why had he insisted on this marriage? And why had he hidden the letter? What was he hiding from her? Before she could ask herself any more questions, the ceremony began. The officiant, a man she didn't know, led them through the simple vows. Emily felt like she was floating, like she wasn't really there. The words echoed in her mind, but they didn't feel real. When it came time to say, "I do," Emily's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes flickered to Jack, who stood beside her, his face expressionless. She couldn't read him. There was nothing to indicate how he was feeling, whether he wanted this as little as she did or if he had accepted his fate. She couldn't even tell if he was nervous. He just stood there, waiting for the ceremony to proceed. She felt the weight of her father's gaze on her, pushing her forward. The pressure was unbearable. "I do," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The words came out without meaning, without feeling. They were just words, nothing more. When Jack spoke the same words, the officiant smiled, and just like that, they were married. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emily sat through the reception, surrounded by unfamiliar faces, her mind still reeling from the events of the morning. It was hard to concentrate on anything. The food, the music, the laughter, it all seemed so distant, so foreign to her. Her father had left early, as he usually did, disappearing into the business world he prioritized above all else. And Jack remained as distant as ever. He said little, his interactions with her limited to the bare minimum. But there was one moment that caught her attention. As the evening wore on, Emily found herself standing near the back of the room, feeling increasingly out of place. She needed some air, some space to clear her head. She stepped outside onto the porch, the cool evening breeze brushing against her skin. She hadn't been outside for long when Jack appeared beside her. She hadn't heard him approach, but there he was, standing a few feet away, his eyes focused on the horizon. There was a tension in the air, something unspoken that neither of them had addressed. "You don't have to do this, you know," Jack said, his voice low but clear. "If you want to leave, you can. I won't stop you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She looked at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Your father," Jack continued, his tone flat. "He's not what he seems. Neither of us is here by choice. But we both have our reasons. If you want to leave, I won't stand in your way." Emily's head spun. What did he mean? Why was he saying this now, after the wedding? "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Why didn't you say anything?" Jack looked at her, his eyes dark. "Because I couldn't. And I'm not sure I can help you now. But I'll do what I can." A chill ran down Emily's spine. There was so much more to this story than she realized, and the man she had just married was the key to unlocking it. Emily stood on the porch, her heart racing, as she watched her father's car pull up in front of the farmhouse. The air felt heavy, charged with a sense of dread that made her skin prickle. It was as if time had slowed, the world around her becoming distorted. Her father's face remained a distant memory, his stern expression from earlier that day haunting her. But now, as she saw him step out of the car, it wasn't just him. 2 other men stepped out with him, men Emily had never seen before. They were dressed in dark suits, their movements sharp and deliberate. "Who are they?" she whispered, more to herself than to Jack, who had stepped closer beside her. Jack stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the men closely. His eyes narrowed, his posture tense. He didn't answer right away, as if considering his words carefully. "They're not here for you," Jack finally said, his voice low and grave. Emily looked at him, her mind spinning. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," Jack said, his voice softening, "but whatever your father's involved in, it's bigger than any of us. They've been watching him for a long time." "Watching him?" Emily's stomach churned. "Why?" Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was obvious, they were watching her father, and by extension, her. That much was clear. The men in suits didn't enter the house right away. They remained outside, speaking in hushed tones, their faces obscured by shadows. It was almost as if they were waiting for something. Waiting for someone. Emily's thoughts whirled. What had she stumbled into? It was impossible to ignore the connection between these men and her father's mysterious behavior. This was the first time she had seen him with strangers in the same capacity, and it felt like the beginning of something dark, something dangerous. "What is it that you're not telling me?" she asked, her voice rising slightly, her frustration growing with every unanswered question. Jack didn't look at her, but his jaw tightened. "There are things I can't explain. Not yet. But trust me, there's more to all of this than you think." Emily clenched her fists, trying to push down the fear and anxiety swelling in her chest. She wasn't a child anymore. She was an adult, and she was no longer willing to sit by and let things unfold without her. She had to know the truth. Taking a deep breath, she stepped away from Jack and moved toward the door. "I need to talk to him," she said. "Don't," Jack warned, stepping in front of her, blocking her path. "If you go in there now, you'll only make things worse. Trust me, your father's not going to tell you anything." "I don't care," Emily shot back. "I have to know. I don't care what it takes. I'm not going to stand here and let him keep lying to me." With that, she pushed past Jack and entered the house. The living room was as quiet as ever, the flickering of the fireplace casting an eerie glow on the walls. Emily's father was standing near the window, his back to her, his posture rigid, as if he had been waiting for her. The two men in suits were nowhere to be seen, but their presence lingered in the room like an unsettling fog. "Dad?" Emily's voice was trembling, but she didn't care. She needed answers. Who were those men? What's going on? Her father turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. His face was a mask of cold indifference, but Emily could see the subtle tightening of his jaw, the flicker of something deeper, something darker, beneath the surface. "I told you, Emily," he said, his voice controlled but with an edge she had never heard before, "there are things you don't understand. Things you're not ready to know." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. "Don't give me that," she snapped. "You've been lying to me for years. Why? Why are you forcing me into this marriage? Why those men? What aren't you telling me?" Her father's face hardened. "You think you know what's best for you, but you don't. You don't understand the world we live in, the decisions I have to make to protect us. Everything I do is for you. Everything I've done has been for this family." Emily's pulse raced, her anger boiling over. "For us? You've done nothing for me but control my life. You think you're protecting me, but you're suffocating me. You want me to marry a man I don't know, in a place I don't belong, with no explanation. You've kept me in the dark about everything, and I won't stand for it anymore." Her father's expression didn't change. He didn't flinch. "You're not in control of this, Emily. You never have been. I've always made the decisions because I know what's best. This marriage isn't just about you and Jack. It's about protecting everything we've built. Everything we have. And you'll understand that one day, even if you don't now." Emily's eyes burned with tears, but she held them back. "No. I won't just accept it. Not this time. I need to know the truth." Her father's gaze darkened, and for the first time, Emily saw a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. "You don't get to ask for the truth. Not yet. You're not ready for what it means." As Emily stood there, her mind racing with confusion and anger, Jack appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said softly, "you need to listen to him. This is bigger than you realize." Her father looked at Jack, his face tightening, but he said nothing. "Why?" Emily demanded. "Why do I have to listen to all of this? What's going on? What's so terrible that you're keeping from me?" "Because some things can't be undone," her father replied, his voice low. "Some choices once made, they change everything. If you knew what I've done, you wouldn't be standing here. You'd run. You'd be too scared to even look at me." Emily's heart thudded in her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. There was more. There was something he wasn't telling her, something so monstrous that it made him afraid to speak it aloud. "What did you do?" she whispered, barely able to form the words. "What are you involved in?" Her father's lips twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It's too late for you to turn back now, Emily. Too late for all of us. The choice has already been made." Jack stepped forward, his voice urgent. "He's right. You can't go back. The deal is already in motion." Emily turned to him, her voice rising in frustration. "What deal? What are you talking about? I don't want to be a part of any deal." Jack's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "The Sullivan family, they're involved in something big, Emily. Your father isn't just some businessman. He's been working with them for years. The marriage to Jack, it's not just about money or power. It's a way to solidify control over something much bigger than anything you can imagine." Emily's head spun. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together, but the picture they formed was darker and more complex than she could have ever imagined. Her father wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He was part of something, a web of power, secrets, and influence that stretched far beyond the boundaries of what Emily had ever known. The man who stepped into the room was not like the others. He wasn't dressed in a suit that screamed business. Instead, his attire was casual but calculated, as if every piece had been chosen with precision. His graying hair and intense eyes gave him an air of authority, but it wasn't just the way he looked that sent a chill down Emily's spine, it was the look he gave her. It was a look she'd seen before. Cold, calculating, and full of silent judgment. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth, almost too calm for comfort. "I'm glad we could finally meet." She stood frozen, her heartbeat pounding in her chest. She had no idea who he was, but everything about him told her he was someone important. Someone dangerous. Her father, who had remained silent throughout the entire confrontation, finally spoke. "This is Gregory Sullivan," he said, his tone flat, almost indifferent. "He's part of the reason you're here." Emily turned her gaze to her father, then back to Gregory. The name Sullivan was no coincidence. The Sullivan family, she had heard rumors, whispers at parties, discussions that never quite made sense until now. They were known for their wealth, but there was something far darker lurking beneath the surface. And now, Emily had a sinking feeling that her father's relationship with them ran deeper than she had ever imagined. Gregory smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was cold and calculated, the kind of smile a predator gives before the hunt begins. "Your father and I go way back, Emily," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. Long before Jack entered the picture. Jack, who had been standing silently in the corner, shifted uncomfortably. Emily could see the tension in his posture, the subtle flick of his eyes from her to her father to Gregory. "I don't understand," Emily said, her voice rising in frustration. "What does any of this have to do with me? Why am I involved in whatever it is you two are doing?" Her father finally turned to face her, his expression hardening. "You're involved because it's the only way to protect us all, Emily. The Sullivans are not just businessmen. They have their fingers in everything, politics, finance, power. And they've decided they want something from us." Emily felt a cold sweat break out across her forehead. "What do they want from us?" "From me?" Her father's gaze dropped for a moment, as if he couldn't bear to meet her eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "They want control. And they've used everything they can to get it. The marriage, it's not just a union. It's a strategic move." Emily was about to speak when Gregory interjected, his voice sharp and commanding. "Your father is trying to protect you, Emily. And, by extension, himself. You're not just marrying anyone, you're marrying into the Sullivan family's empire. This is bigger than love or choice. It's about survival." "Survival?" Emily echoed, her heart pounding. "Survival from what?" Gregory looked at her, his eyes narrowing as if weighing how much to say. "Survival from forces you can't even comprehend. There are people in this world, powerful people, who don't hesitate to do whatever it takes to secure their interests. Your father's connections with the Sullivans were forged in blood. It's been years in the making. And now, you're part of it." Emily's mind was reeling. This was no longer about a simple marriage. It wasn't about Jack or her father's expectations. It was about something far more sinister. The Sullivans were not just a wealthy family, they were an empire, a shadow organization that controlled things from behind the scenes, and her father was tangled in their web. "Why me?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Why do I have to be the one to marry Jack?" Her father met her gaze with a look that almost seemed apologetic. "Because, Emily, you're the key. You're the one who can cement the deal. Your marriage to Jack will give us leverage. It's the final piece in the puzzle." Jack stepped forward, his expression conflicted, as if torn between loyalty to Emily's father and his growing feelings for her. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said quietly. "Neither of us did." Emily turned to face him, her frustration boiling over. "Then why don't you say something? Why are you letting him do this to me?" Jack shook his head. It's not as simple as that. There's more at stake here than just us, Emily. If I had a choice, believe me, I would have never agreed to any of this. Emily's mind raced, but she couldn't quite put the pieces together. Her father was a part of something dangerous, and now she was trapped in the middle of it. What was she supposed to do now? She wanted to run, to escape this twisted web of lies, but she knew she couldn't. She was already too deep. Gregory's eyes flicked to the door. "We'll talk more later," he said. "There's something you need to understand about the situation you're in. And it's time you understood the stakes." The next few days were a blur. Emily barely spoke to her father, unable to process what he had told her. She avoided Jack as much as possible, her emotions torn between anger, betrayal, and confusion. The mansion felt like a prison now, its walls closing in on her. She could feel the weight of the secrets pressing down on her, suffocating her every moment. Her father remained distant, spending most of his time in meetings with Gregory and other figures she had never seen before. Every time Emily tried to ask him more questions, he shut her down, reminding her that she didn't have the right to know everything. It was for her own protection, he said. She wasn't ready to understand the full extent of the danger they were in. But Emily didn't care about protection anymore. She wanted the truth. And she was going to find it, no matter what. One evening, after her father had retired to his study, Emily made her decision. She would confront Gregory Sullivan directly. He knew more than he was letting on, and she had a feeling that if she could get him alone, he would reveal the secrets her father refused to share. She slipped quietly through the house, her footsteps silent on the marble floors. She found Gregory in the library, standing by the window, looking out over the sprawling estate. His back was to her, but she knew he was aware of her presence. "Mr. Sullivan," Emily said, her voice steadied despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Gregory turned slowly, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Ah, Emily. I wondered when you'd come to see me." "You know why I'm here," she said, trying to mask the unease in her voice. "I need answers." Gregory regarded her for a long moment, his eyes calculating. "Answers come with a price," he said, his tone cold. "Are you sure you're willing to pay it?" Emily didn't hesitate. "I'll pay whatever it costs." The dim light of the library felt colder now, the shadows creeping longer across the polished floors as Emily stood facing Gregory Sullivan. She felt the weight of his gaze, the coldness in it, like an unseen hand tightening around her chest. Her heart raced, the pounding echoing in her ears as she tried to steady her breath. "You said you'd give me answers," Emily said, her voice firmer than she felt. She had made it this far, she wasn't about to back down now. But inside, every nerve was on edge. She had no idea what she was about to uncover. Gregory's smile never wavered. He stepped toward her slowly, his every movement deliberate, as if savoring the moment. "I did say that," he murmured, almost as though he was speaking to himself. "But are you truly prepared to hear what I have to say? Because once I tell you, there is no turning back." Emily swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. "I need to know. I have to know what my father's been hiding." "What you're hiding?" For the first time since she'd entered the room, Gregory's expression faltered, just slightly. There was a flicker of something, maybe a regret, but it vanished before she could pinpoint it. His voice, however, was still calm, measured, and cool. "Your father and we've been through a lot together. More than you could ever imagine. And what he's done, what he's become, was never supposed to be part of the plan. But sometimes, plans change. And when they do, there's no going back." Emily felt the tension build between them like an invisible wall, and she suddenly realized just how much was at stake, not just her future, but the entire life she had known. She tried to steady her breath. "What plan? What are you talking about?" Gregory's lips pressed together into a thin line as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke, each word measured, deliberate. It was never meant to be like this. Your father and I, we were part of something much larger, something far more dangerous than either of us anticipated. But when you're in this game, you either play to win or get burned. And your father, he decided to win. At all costs. Emily's mind was spinning. She couldn't make sense of his words. What game? What are you saying? And how does it all involve me? Why am I the one who has to marry Jack? Gregory's eyes darkened as he took a step closer. He lowered his voice, his words more urgent now. You're the key to everything, Emily. Your father knew it the moment you were born. You've always been part of this plan, even if you didn't know it. The Sullivans, my family, were not just a powerful business empire. We control much more than money, we control influence, information, and people. And your marriage to Jack isn't just about uniting two families. It's about cementing an alliance that will give us more power than you can possibly understand. Emily's mind raced to process his words. She had known there were secrets, but she never imagined they were this deep. You're saying, my marriage to Jack is a transaction. A way to gain more control. But why? Why me? Why Jack? Gregory's gaze softened, just a little, as if acknowledging her confusion. It's not about love, Emily. It never was. It's about legacy, about securing our future. Your father, he thought he could use you as a pawn. But he underestimated the lengths the Sullivans would go to. And now, the stakes are higher than ever. She shook her head, trying to force the pieces together. But I'm not just some tool. I'm not a chess piece to be moved around by my father, or you, or anyone. I have a life of my own. Gregory's expression turned colder, his eyes narrowing. You don't understand. Your father wasn't the only one who made sacrifices, Emily. We all did. And there's a price to be paid when you step into this world. You want freedom. You want to escape. There's no escape from this. You're already in too deep. Her breath hitched. She took a step back, her mind reeling with the implications of his words. What do you mean I'm in too deep? You don't know me. You don't know what I want. I know more about you than you think, Gregory said, his voice almost a whisper now. I know what your father's done to you. What he's made you believe. I know the weight you carry. And I know that the only way for you to survive is to accept the truth. Emily was silent, her throat tight with emotion. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. It was too much. The realization that her entire life, everything she thought she knew, had been manipulated, controlled by forces beyond her comprehension, was more than she could handle. But Gregory wasn't finished. You're the one who will tip the balance, Emily. You'll be the one to decide how this all ends. You may not like it, but your actions will have consequences. You'll either be a part of the power shift, or you'll be a casualty of it. That's the reality. The days that followed Gregory's revelation felt like a blur. A whirlwind of confusion and dread. Emily tried to speak to her father, to confront him with the truths she had learned, but he refused to acknowledge her questions. It was as if he had become a different person, more distant, colder than she had ever known him. Her mind was a mess of conflicting thoughts. She wanted to believe that there was more to this than Gregory had said. That her father had some noble reason for all of this. But every time she looked at him, she saw the same man who had pushed her into a marriage she didn't want, a man who had made her feel like a pawn in a game of power and control. But then there was Jack. The man she was supposed to marry. He seemed torn between his loyalty to her father and his own feelings for her. She knew he didn't want this either. And yet, here they were, trapped in this twisted arrangement. Emily felt like a puppet, her strings being pulled by forces she couldn't see, let alone control. She didn't know who to trust, didn't know what to believe. And every day, the pressure to conform, to play along, grew stronger. She couldn't take it anymore. That night, Emily made her decision. She couldn't wait for the answers any longer. She had to confront the truth, even if it meant risking everything. She would go to Gregory again, demand the answers that had been promised to her. And maybe, just maybe, she would find a way out. The mansion was silent as she made her way to the library, her heart pounding in her chest. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going to be controlled anymore. She would find her way, even if it meant going against her father, going against everything she had known. When she entered the library, Gregory was waiting for her, just as she had expected. He didn't seem surprised to see her. His expression was unreadable, as always, but Emily could see a flicker of something in his eyes. Perhaps he was anticipating what she would say next. "I'm done playing along," Emily said, her voice steady but firm. "I want the truth, Gregory. No more games. No more lies." He studied her for a moment before speaking, his voice almost soft, as if pitying her. "You think you're in control now? You think you can just walk away from this? I don't care what it takes. I'm not going to be a part of this any longer." Gregory sighed, almost as though he had expected her to say that. "I was hoping you'd understand," he said, his voice colder now. "But it seems you're not ready for the truth." "I'm ready," Emily insisted. "Tell me what's really going on." Gregory's eyes hardened, and for the first time, Emily saw a flash of something darker. Something dangerous. "Fine," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "If you want the truth, I'll give it to you. But know this, once you hear it, there's no going back. And you'll have to live with the consequences." The weight of Gregory's words lingered in the heavy air of the library like a storm waiting to break. Emily's mind spun with questions, but she could feel her resolve hardening with each passing second. She had to know the truth, whatever it was, because the shadows of deception and manipulation had already been cast too deep into her life. There was no turning back now. Gregory leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the edge of the desk. He watched her with a calculating expression, as though measuring her every reaction. His silence stretched out, deliberate, and the tension between them thickened. Emily couldn't stand it any longer. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice low but firm. "What's the real story? What has my father been hiding? Why does everything feel like it's falling apart?" Gregory's gaze darkened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something cold and calculating, far removed from the suave, confident man she had known. "You really want to know? You think you can handle it?" he asked, his voice sharp. Emily stood her ground, refusing to back down. "Yes. I'm done pretending that I don't understand what's happening. I need to know." Gregory's lips curled into a small, almost pitying smile. He rose from his chair, his tall frame looming over her as he slowly began to pace the room. "Very well. But remember, once you learn the truth, everything changes. You can't unlearn it." Emily's heart pounded in her chest, the anticipation almost unbearable. She was so close to uncovering the secrets that had twisted her life into something unrecognizable, and yet, part of her wondered if she could really handle what was coming next. Gregory stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression serious now. "It's not just about your father. You see, Emily, your life, your future, was decided long before you were even born. Your family, the Sullivan family, we've been running this game for generations. It's always been about power, influence, and control." "Control?" Emily repeated, her voice tight with disbelief. "But I thought my father just wanted the best for me. I never thought any of this was calculated." Gregory's expression softened ever so slightly, and he took a step closer. "Your father loves you. In his own way. But love can be a complicated thing when you're dealing with something as powerful and dangerous as what we're involved in. Your life was never meant to be your own, Emily. Your marriage to Jack, to the farmer, it's not just a political alliance. It's a business deal. It's a way of securing a legacy. Emily's mind reeled. The pieces were slowly starting to come together, but it felt like a puzzle with too many missing parts. A legacy? She asked, almost too afraid to hear the answer. What does that even mean? Gregory exhaled sharply, as if preparing to reveal something monumental. Your father didn't just build a fortune. He made a network of deals with people, dangerous people. Across industries and borders. He thought he could control everything, Emily. But when you play in this game, there are always strings attached. The problem with your father's plan was that he underestimated how far people would go to control him. He thought the Sullivan name would be enough to protect him. But it wasn't. Emily took a step back, her pulse quickening. You're saying my father's in trouble? That he's been using me this whole time? Gregory's eyes flashed with something dark, something she couldn't quite place. Your father's always been good at playing the part of a successful businessman, but underneath that facade, he's made some dangerous enemies. Enemies who want more than money. They want power. And when they saw an opportunity to leverage his daughter, someone with no ties to the family business, they took it. They planned your marriage to Jack from the moment you were born. You were the key to everything. Emily's breath hitched. She felt as if the ground beneath her was crumbling away, and the dizzying height of it was making her heart race. But I'm not a pawn, she exclaimed, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. I'm not just a piece in someone's game. I deserve more than that. Gregory's eyes softened with what appeared to be a mix of understanding and regret. You deserve more, Emily. But the world doesn't work that way. Your father couldn't see it, but I do. You have a chance to change everything. You have a chance to break free from this. But it won't be easy. There are forces at play far more dangerous than you realize. Who? She demanded. Who are these people, and why are they doing this to me? To my father? Gregory's face hardened. I wish I could give you the full story. But some things are better left unsaid, for now. The people involved in this, they're not just businessmen or politicians. They're more than that. They control things you can't even imagine. Information, people, entire economies. They don't care about your father. They care about power. And your marriage to Jack is just the beginning of their plan. Emily's mind raced, trying to process everything he was saying. Her whole life had been a lie. The man she thought she knew as her father, the man who had supposedly given her a life of privilege and comfort, was tied to a dangerous web of power and manipulation. And she was caught in the middle of it all. But why Jack? Emily asked, her voice faltering. Why did they choose him? He's just a farmer. Gregory's lips curled into a tight smile. That's the part you don't understand yet. Jack isn't just any farmer. He's more connected than you think. His family has been involved with the Sullivan Empire for years, whether you knew it or not. They've been keeping watch over you, waiting for the right moment. And when your father made the decision to marry you off, they were ready. Jack is the perfect match, not because of his wealth, but because of his connections. His loyalty to the right people. Emily's mind spun as she tried to absorb the enormity of what Gregory was revealing. Jack wasn't just some innocent man caught in the crossfire, he was a part of this twisted game, too. But what did that mean for her? What did it mean for the life she thought she could build with him? Gregory's gaze turned steely as he took a step back. You're at a crossroads now, Emily. You've learned the truth, but you have a choice. You can either stay in this world and play your part, or you can walk away and risk everything. But if you choose to walk away, be prepared for the consequences. The people we're dealing with don't just let go of their pawns. Emily's heart clenched at the cold finality in his voice. The words hung in the air like a warning, like a threat. She didn't know what to believe anymore, didn't know who to trust. But one thing was clear, her life was no longer her own. It had never been. She stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. She was trapped. But there was still a part of her that refused to give up. She couldn't let this define her, no matter how much danger was closing in. She had to fight. "Thank you for telling me the truth, Gregory," she said, her voice low but steady. "But I'm not done. I'm not giving up yet. You may think I'm just a pawn, but I'm not. And I'm going to prove it." Gregory's eyes glinted with a mixture of admiration and something else she couldn't quite place. "You're brave, Emily. I'll give you that. But this isn't a game. And you're not the one making the moves anymore." She met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm the one who decides my fate. Not you. Not my father. Not anyone else." Gregory seemed to hesitate, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. Then, with a slight nod, he turned away. "Very well. But remember, you were warned." The days that followed Gregory's revelation felt like a blur. Each moment was a blur of confusion and unease, with every second weighed down by the knowledge that her life had never been her own. Emily had always believed in the comfort of her family, in the safety her father's wealth and influence provided. But now, everything she'd known, everything she'd trusted, seemed like a carefully constructed lie. She hadn't spoken to her father since that fateful meeting in the library. She couldn't. The air between them was thick with too many unspoken words, too many broken pieces of truth that neither of them were prepared to acknowledge. How could she confront him after everything Gregory had told her? How could she even look him in the eye knowing that he had sold her to someone like Jack, a man she thought she knew but now realized she didn't understand at all? But she couldn't stay silent forever. Emily knew that the time had come to confront the man who had shaped her life. If there was a way out, she had to find it now. She couldn't let herself be controlled any longer. That night, after hours of pacing her room, Emily made her decision. She would confront her father, demand answers. She couldn't trust Gregory completely, but there had to be truth in what he'd said. Jack wasn't just a farmer, he was part of something bigger, something dangerous. And if she was going to save herself, she had to know what that was. The house was quiet when Emily descended the grand staircase, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. It was late, well past midnight, but she knew her father would be in his study, poring over financial reports or whatever else kept him glued to his desk. He rarely ever slept before 2 a.m., preferring the silence of the night to the chaos of the day. She had always admired his work ethic, his drive. But tonight, she didn't care about his success or the empire he had built. She cared about one thing, the truth. When she reached the study, Emily hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the doorknob. She could hear the faint rustling of papers, the low hum of a computer, the sound of her father's steady breathing. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. Her father was sitting at his desk, his back to her, but he didn't seem surprised when she walked in. In fact, he didn't react at all. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment for days. "Father," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to sound strong. "We need to talk." The old man didn't turn around. "I'm sure we do, Emily," he said softly. His voice was cold, distant, like he was already bracing himself for the confrontation he knew was inevitable. "But I don't think you're going to like what you hear." "Then I guess it's time to hear it," she replied, stepping further into the room. "I know about the marriage arrangement. I know what's been going on. And I want the truth. All of it." Finally, her father turned in his chair, his face expressionless. He was older than she remembered, his hair graying at the temples, his once sharp eyes now clouded with exhaustion and regret. There was something almost haunting in the way he looked at her, as though he saw a reflection of himself in her eyes, someone he had failed, someone who had become a part of a system he had built and couldn't escape from. "You shouldn't have found out, Emily," he said quietly. "But I suppose it was inevitable." "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice rising now, her frustration boiling over. Why didn't you tell me what this was all about? I thought I was your daughter. Why did you sell me off like this? Was my life worth so little to you? Her father's gaze flickered for a moment, as if he were searching for the right words, but he remained silent. Emily could see the pain etched into his face, the weight of years of decisions that had brought them both to this point. It was never supposed to be like this, he said finally, his voice almost a whisper. I never wanted to drag you into this mess. But when the deal was struck, when I realized the full scope of what was at stake, I couldn't back out. There were lives on the line, lives far more important than ours. You have to understand, Emily, it was never about you. It was about everything else. The money. The power. The future. Why didn't you tell me, she repeated, her voice breaking. Why didn't you trust me enough to let me make my own decisions? To let me have my own life? Her father's eyes softened for a moment, but then he looked away, as if the weight of her words was too much for him to bear. I tried to protect you. I thought I was protecting you from this world, from the darkness that it brings. I thought if I kept you safe, you would be spared. But I was wrong. I underestimated everything. And now, we're all caught in something we can't get out of. Emily's chest tightened, a mix of anger, betrayal, and sorrow welling up inside her. So what? You just gave me away. You made me a pawn in this sick game of yours. How could you think that was protecting me? Her father's face grew grim, and for the first time, she saw something resembling regret in his eyes. Because I didn't have a choice. There are forces far beyond your comprehension, Emily. You don't understand the magnitude of what we're dealing with. The people you think are your allies, they're not. They're using you. You've always been a piece in their game, and now, you have to play your part. What if I don't want to play anymore? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I refuse? Her father's gaze grew colder. Then you will pay the price. The same way I will. The same way your mother did. The word struck Emily like a blow. What happened to Mom? She asked, her voice quivering. She had never asked about her mother much, always assuming that it was too painful for her father to talk about. But now, she felt like she needed to know. Her father's jaw tightened. She was caught in this. And it destroyed her. She couldn't handle the pressure, the constant threats. One day, she was gone. Just like that. And I've been trying to keep you safe ever since, Emily. But I've failed. The room fell silent, the weight of his admission hanging in the air between them like a suffocating cloud. Emily stood frozen, her mind racing. Her mother's death. Her father's regrets. The life she thought she understood, the people she thought she knew, it was all crumbling around her. I don't know what to do anymore, her father said softly, his voice carrying the weight of years of guilt. I never wanted this life for you. But now, it's too late. It's all too late. Emily's eyes blurred with unshed tears as she fought to keep her composure. She couldn't afford to break down now. Not when she was so close. There has to be a way out, she said, her voice steady, though her heart felt like it was about to shatter. I won't play their game. I won't let them control me. I'll find another way. Her father looked at her with a mixture of sadness and fear. You don't understand. There is no other way. Not unless you want to risk everything. And that includes your life. The words hung heavy between them, and Emily knew that her world had just tilted off its axis once again. There was no turning back. The choice she was about to make would change everything. But she wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Not when she still had a chance to take control of her destiny. The room was cold. It felt colder than it had ever been before, the chill seeping into Emily's bones as her father's words echoed in her mind. The weight of his confession hung in the air like a dark storm cloud, suffocating her thoughts. There was no turning back now. Her father had done everything he could to keep her away from the truth, to keep her safe, but the truth had a way of seeping through the cracks, no matter how tightly they were sealed. Your life was never your own, her father had said, his voice thick with regret. You were always part of a bigger plan, something that neither of us could ever escape from. Emily's heart raced. The truth was inescapable now, and she could no longer deny the reality of the world she had been born into. A world of wealth, power, and manipulation, where the people you loved were sometimes the ones you had to fear the most. Where love could be a currency, and trust could be as fragile as glass. Her father's confession had shattered everything she thought she knew. But despite the pain, despite the overwhelming grief, Emily knew one thing: she couldn't go on living in the shadow of his mistakes. She couldn't let her future be decided by a game that was never meant for her to play. As she stood there, alone in the cold silence of the study, Emily's mind raced. Her father's warnings about the consequences of rejecting the life he had mapped out for her had been clear. The people who had orchestrated her marriage to Jack, the same people who had orchestrated her entire existence, were not people she could simply walk away from. They weren't ordinary individuals. They were part of a dangerous web of influence that spanned far beyond her understanding. But Emily wasn't just anyone. She was his daughter. She had a right to her own choices, her own life. And she wouldn't let anyone take that away from her, not even her father. I won't let them control me, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling with a mix of defiance and fear. Her father's gaze never wavered, but she saw the flicker of something in his eyes, a mixture of pride and regret. He knew what she was about to do. He knew she would choose a path that could very well destroy everything they had worked for. I'm not afraid of them, she continued, more to herself than to him. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. Her father's face grew pale, as if the weight of her words had physically drained him. Emily, please. You don't know what you're up against. You don't know what it means to cross them. I've tried to protect you, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. If you walk away from this, you won't just be walking away from me, you'll be walking away from everything we've ever known. Emily took a step forward, her resolve hardening. I don't care about everything we've known. I care about who I am. I care about what I want. And I won't let you or anyone else take that from me. For the first time in years, she saw a glimmer of fear in her father's eyes. It was brief, fleeting, but it was enough to confirm what she had always suspected: her father was not as powerful as he had seemed. He had been manipulated, too. And now, he was just another pawn in a game far bigger than he could control. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly, his voice cracking with emotion. But if you go down this path, you'll lose more than me. You'll lose everything. You'll lose the life you've always known. And you'll never be the same again. I'm already not the same, Emily replied, her voice steady. I've already lost everything. But that doesn't mean I have to stay in this cage. Her father looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he stood up, walking slowly to the window. The moonlight illuminated his face, casting long shadows that made him appear even older, more weary than he had moments before. You were always the bright one, he said softly, his back to her. I never wanted you to lose that light. But now. His voice trailed off, and for the first time, Emily realized how truly broken he was. This man, the one who had controlled her every move, had been crushed by the very forces he had tried to protect her from. He wasn't the villain. He was just a man, flawed, weak, and trapped in a web of his own making. I'm sorry, Emily, he whispered, barely audible. I'm so sorry. The words were more than an apology. They were a confession, a recognition that he had failed her in ways that no amount of wealth or power could ever fix. For all the riches he had accumulated, he had never been able to give her what she truly needed: freedom. Emily swallowed hard, the lump in her throat threatening to choke her. She wanted to cry, to scream, to run away from all of it. But she couldn't. She had made her decision. There was no turning back. "I'm not staying here," she said, her voice firm. "I'm leaving. And I'm going to find my own way. I don't know what's out there, but I'm not afraid of the unknown anymore." Her father turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "You don't know what you're up against, Emily. You think you can just walk away from all of this? You think they'll let you?" "I don't care," Emily replied. "I'd rather face the unknown than stay here, trapped in a life I never chose." There was a long pause as they both stood in silence, the weight of the moment settling between them. Emily's heart was pounding in her chest, but she knew, deep down, that she had made the right choice. She couldn't keep living in the shadows of the past. She had to step into the light, no matter how painful that might be. Finally, her father spoke, his voice quieter now. "I can't stop you, can I?" "No," Emily said, shaking her head. "You can't. But you can help me. You can help me by telling me everything. No more secrets." Her father looked at her for a long time, his face filled with regret, but also a deep sense of love. He walked back to his desk, sitting down heavily in the chair. For a long time, he said nothing. And then, at last, he spoke. "There's one thing you need to know," he said quietly. "The people who made this deal with me, they're not just powerful. They're dangerous. And they won't let you go without a fight. If you leave, they'll come after you. But I'll help you. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." Emily took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Then help me. Help me end this." Her father nodded, a look of determination in his eyes. "I will. But be prepared, Emily. Once we take this step, there's no going back." Emily's heart raced, but she knew that there was no other choice. She had to take control of her own destiny. And if it meant risking everything, then so be it. With a final glance at her father, Emily turned and walked out of the study, her footsteps echoing through the silent halls. The weight of the world felt like it was on her shoulders, but for the first time in her life, she felt free.